Hello and welcome to The Drum. I'm Steve Cannane. Coming up, who'll get the nod from the Australian selectors for the Ashes squad on Monday? Will Mark Webber be our next Formula One world champion? And what's Warney likely to serve up on his very own burger? Our panel tonight, Amanda Shalala from ABC News 24, Craig Norenbergs from ABC Grandstand, and in Perth, ABC's cricket commentator, Glenn Mitchell. Well, first up tonight to the continuing allegations of corruption in world cricket. Pakistani wicketkeeper Zal Cannane header has retired from the game after walking out on his team's one-day series in Dubai and heading to the UK to seek asylum. In an interview with the BBC, Header claims he and his family received death threats for refusing to fix matches against South Africa.
Said if you will work with us, we will give you a lot of money, but they don't, mention the money. But after that, they said if you can't help us, you will be not continue your cricket, and if you can't, like that. So when you go Pakistan, we will kill you and your family also.
The 24-year-old says cricket is finished unless it rebuilds its tarnished image. Glenn, 12 months ago this story would have shocked the world, but the sad thing is these allegations don't come as any surprise anymore.
No, you're right, Steve. Unfortunately, that is the case. But you have to wonder now when the ICC is actually going to take a fair dinkum stance on this. It was back in March 2009 when we saw what could have been a tragic incident. It still resulted in a loss of life when the Sri Lankan cricket team was attacked on the way to the stadium in Lahore. And as a result of that, next year, in February and March, what was going to be a four-nation hosting of the World Cup is now down to three, with Pakistan having been excluded. But looking at what Header has said in the last 24 to 48 hours, you have to wonder now whether the ICC really needs to take more away from Pakistan than just an international hosting right, whether they should be in that World Cup next year. We talk all the time, we hear players and fans talking about the myriad one-day games that are played around the world and the fact that most people, Ricky Ponting and the likes, talks about meaningless tournaments. The jewel in the crown of cricket, from a limited overs perspective, is certainly the 50-over World Cup. Now, Pakistan is so tainted at the moment that they could actually end up having a big say in who actually qualifies for quarter, semi-finals and finals at next year's World Cup. And I think at the moment that the taint is so, and the stain is so indelible on Pakistan cricket that the ICC is duty-bound to act now. They have to, I think, suspend Pakistan, as long as they've got people like Ijaz Butt as the chairman, and the best thing that he seems to do is imitate an ostrich somewhere in Africa with his head buried in the sand. I can't see that they can remain in international cricket. It's too big a risk, in particular, playing on the subcontinent in a World Cup, which ICC officials and everyone involved in cricket still sees as one of its most prestigious tournaments.
Craig, do you agree with Glenn there that Pakistan should be banned from playing cricket?
Yeah, absolutely. Kick them out. It's a little bit like apartheid in South Africa in the day. The only way the change came about is when we banned them from international sports for good. We should be doing the same with Pakistan. They're in our group at the World Cup next year. So imagine it comes down to Australia and Pakistan playing, and it's a tightly run game and it goes either way very close. People are all going to say, well, the fix was on. Until they clean this up, there's no place for Pakistan in the game.
And Amanda, interesting response from the Pakistan Cricket Board. They tore up his contract. You know, that shows how seriously they take a whistleblower in this situation.
Yeah, as Glenn alluded to, I don't think there's much credibility with the Pakistan Cricket Board. They've buried their head in the sand many times before. They shifted the blame when the allegations came out about the no balls with Amir Butt and Asif. So they need to try and step up and claim some responsibility here. I've got to applaud Header for coming out and making a stand. It's a very, very brave thing to do if what he's saying is true, and sort of putting his neck on the line. And if more players come forward and do that, then there'll be no ground to stand on for the bookmakers.
But Glenn, can we trust the ICC to take action on Pakistan? They don't have a great recent history, do they?
Well, it all depends, in essence, Steve, what India wants to do. India, as we know, their financial strength has bought so many votes at the table when they sit down the 10 credited nations. Zimbabwe not back with full test status yet, but at the moment, so many of the nations are actually bankrolled by this incredible wealth that India has garnered through international television rights. It'll all stem, really, as to whether India believes Pakistan should be strongly sanctioned. But, I mean, can you imagine this? One of the stories that Header has reflected on in the last couple of days is an incident where he was captaining his domestic team, and they were playing a match where the opponent, captained by Salman Butt, who, as we now know, is facing allegations of spot fixing, the former captain, and his team, Salman Butt's team, needed to have a convincing win to get into the semi-final of their one-day domestic competition. They wanted Header to select a player that had never been heard of before as a fast bowler. He refused. He was stripped of the captaincy. The fast bowler played, and that fast bowler bowled 18 balls, 3 overs, none for 78. That's 4.3 runs a ball. Pakistan said, we'll have an inquiry into that, and so they couldn't find anything awry. Now, if that happened in a domestic competition in England or Australia, can you imagine the headlines and the focus that would be on that? Pakistan is in denial, and it comes right from the top with Ijaz Butt. When he initially made comments after the spot fixing that, there were England players on the take, and he knew that, and then all of a sudden, under legal pressure, he backed out. I mean, he is a man that is a loose cannon. And while Pakistan continues, the government continues to condone someone like that as the head of Pakistan cricket, it's got no future at the moment at the international table.
That game you mentioned, Glenn, was an extraordinary example. I mean, they scored 122 runs off 6 overs.
Exactly. I mean, if that happened, imagine if that happened in an Australian game, in this 45-over game that we have now, that a team chasing 122 with 37 balls in their innings, 6.1 overs, brought up the winning runs. In particular, if it meant that that team then was benefiting by a change in net run rate to get into a semi-final. There would be all sorts of inquiries, yet in Pakistan it just seems to be, well, it's another day at the cricket, let's not worry about it. The ICC, and as you mentioned, what powers the ICC got? It's based on India. But for the credibility of the sport, even India has to start to realise very shortly that they are being shortchanged by what's happening in Pakistan. And unless there is a sweeping change across the board, starting with the board, I don't think we're going to see any positive movement. So if they play in the World Cup next year, as Craig said a moment ago, so many of the results that Pakistan are involved in, it's like when an athlete runs an incredible time, swims an incredible time, the first thing you think about is it legal in regard to performance-enhancing substances? We're going to think the same every time cricket in Pakistan throws up a bizarre result.
And Amanda, it's an incredibly brave act by the Pakistani wicketkeeper header to come out and speak like this. He spoke to the BBC sports editor and he says there's no reason not to believe him, that he feels like his story stacks up. And he's really put himself at risk. He says that his life was threatened and also his family's life was threatened. And apparently the police in Pakistan have since been trying to protect his family.
Well, this is making a huge statement and could really change the way that cricketers do deal with approaches from bookmakers, because up until now it's very much been kept under the carpet. And even if players had been approached, remember Mark Waugh and Shane Warne were approached quite a few years back and they all tried to keep it very hush-hush. But if players will come out, actually make a stand and say, look, this is going on, we need to wipe it out, then there might actually be some chance of getting rid of them rather than trying to ignore it and pretend that it doesn't exist.
Well, on Monday, Australia will name its squad to face England in the first test of the Ashes series. The selection panel needs to make some big decisions. Do they inject some new blood into the faltering middle order? And do they pick Nathan Horrocks? Shane Warne made it clear today that he thinks Australia should pick a spinner for Brisbane.
We're playing a spinner, mate. Yeah, I don't think we need 5 seamers.
Yeah, okay. So would you play Horrocks or something?
I think Nathan Horrocks is the #1 spinner, yeah.
Okay.
Glenn Mitchell, is Warney right? Should they pick a spinner and should it be Nathan Horrocks?
I think for team balance they probably need a spinner. It may be beneficial for Marcus North's short-term future if they don't, because he's got a second string to his bow whilst he continues to have this roller coaster run with how many he can score from one match to the next. Greg Chappell has already come out. He's the new full-time selector, the new member of the panel of 4, saying that he believes that you need to select a team that is across all possible conditions and variations in a game. He's alluded to the fact that a spinner will be there. There's no doubt that Xavier Doherty is applying pressure. Nathan Horrocks has been very disappointing. Averaged, 65 in his 2 tests earlier this year in New Zealand, 64 against India, a good test-playing nation when it comes to playing spin, in fact the best in the world. But I think he probably deserves the opportunity. I just wonder, though, about it naming this team on Monday. There'll be a lot of parents around that will probably be being quizzed by their parents, or by their children today now, wanting to know what they're going to get for Christmas. It seems an inordinately early period to name the test team. And they may even name a squad of 13. I mean, Bollinger's going to play tomorrow with Simon Kadich. They're both turning out in club cricket, are not declared fit enough to play for New South Wales in this current round of fixtures. But it'll be fascinating to see just how many they name on Monday. But I'm sure Nathan Horrocks will be one of the 12, possibly 13 that are named.
Craig, who do you think should be the spinner? I mean, I noticed that Stewie McGill came out this week and said Marcus North should be the front line
I think you're going to say Stuart McGill should make a comeback.
Sure, it'd be great to have
I'd
him
love
back.
to see him roll his arm out. The other thing that Glenn spoke about on Monday, it is kind of early, and they're doing this kind of reality TV meets the Australian cricket team, announcing the squad on the steps of the Opera House and who's going to be in the team, who's going to miss out. Cricket Australia's copped a lot of criticism for this, but we know for a fact that some of the criticism is where are the kids going to come from, where are the next generation going to come from. If this is the way to get them attracted to cricket, to put it in this kind of reality setting, I'm all for it. I think cricket needs a bit of a shake-up. As far as the team goes, I don't think there's going to be too many surprises. They're not going to tinker with it too much. I think they're going to hope that they're going to squeeze a little bit more out of their veteran players just one last time against England. I think this Ashes series, in terms of who's going to win, is probably one series too many for England. If we won at home, I'd be really worried. And the other thing, maybe get some money on a few draws, because rain at that time of year, unseasonal rain, is tipped right across Australia. So the rain might save us. If we can win in Brisbane and hold on to that 1-0, well, we might need someone to spin our way out of trouble come the 5th test. And if you've got tickets to the SCG test, that might be the decider. Good luck to people if they got them.
Amanda, what about the middle order? It's been a bit wonky of late. The pressures on Marcus North and Mike Hussey. Do you reckon they're going to drop either one of those?
I don't think they will. The selectors tend to play it safe, particularly for a home Ashes series. They won't want to take any risks. Personally, I would love to see some fresh blood come in the middle order. And I think, unlike the Nathan Horrocks situation, where there really isn't another spinner coming through applying enough pressure on him, I think there are a couple of really good youngsters coming through, particularly Usman Khawaja for New South Wales, that could really perform well on that stage and should be given a chance, I think, particularly at home. It would be unfair to throw him in an overseas tour. But will the selectors do it? I don't think so. But it's time for Huss and North to go.
Glenn Mitchell, you mentioned there that Greg Chappell's just become the first full-time national selector, and we know that he believes in a youth policy. He did this when he was the coach of India. He himself was the beneficiary of it when he was selected to play for Australia at quite a young age. Do you think he's going to be pushing for younger batsmen in that team?
I think he'll be progressive, Steve, and I think that's important for Australian cricket because perhaps they have just trod water for a little bit too long, and we saw what happened after the Max exodus at the end of the last Ashes series, that all of a sudden Ricky Ponting found himself not having anywhere near the same firepower with either bat or ball. And I think Greg Chappell's probably been outside Australia and has seen the way he was first-hand able to help regenerate India, which is now the #1 test-playing nation in the world. I think what we're going to see this summer, though, especially if Australia stumbles in either of the first 2 test matches, that the points that players have been able to rack up with the selectors, I think they may go through them pretty quickly. I mean, we haven't seen Australia lose at the Gabba since 1988-89, towards the end of the Ambrose and Walsh duo, when the West Indies were starting to head towards the end of their decline. If England was to get up there in that first test, and all of a sudden, as Craig mentioned, with some rather unseasonal rain forecast for the bulk of Australia, including where I am here in Perth, where it's been incredibly dry, they're talking about plenty of rain here next month as well. I think Australia then have to come from behind. They've got to win one more test. I think the selectors then will start to make changes. But I agree with